Hi, guys. Welcome to the How I Raise It podcast, the show where we get an inside, unfiltered look at how real entrepreneurs raise capital for their businesses. I'm your host, Nathan Beckert, and today's episode is with Mir Hwang of GigFinesse, a startup where musicians can book gigs and bar owners can book musicians. Pretty cool concept. We talk about starting this as a student, running lean, dealing with junior analysts and other gatekeepers at venture funds, and much more. If you're tuning into this podcast to learn how to raise capital for your business, I've created a super valuable free welcome package for you. It includes a list of 2,500 investors who don't require a warm intro, plus 200 questions that investors are going to ask you. So it's really going to help you get ready to raise capital. To get instant access to this, please click the link in the first comment. While you're there, leave us a nice comment, what you like about this episode, of this series in general. We really appreciate that feedback. Last but not least, if you enjoy this conversation and think someone else would too, please share it with them and hit that subscribe button to get all our latest episodes. Thank you. Now sit back and enjoy this chat with Mir.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Mir Hwang of GigFinesse coming to us from Nashville. How's your day going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Let's just jump right into it. What is GigFinesse?
So GigFinesse, we've been transforming the booking process for artists and venues by leveraging live show data since 2019.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So I guess I'll give you a quick background about myself, and how the company came about. So the idea for GigFinesse came to me relatively early when I was in actually middle school trying to book my first show for my band. I fell in love with music, playing in bands and putting on shows with my friends. And I was lucky enough to grow into eventually a session drummer and had the pleasure of being on the road. And, kind of by doing so, I think I became really intimately familiar with the intricacies and frustrations of the live booking side. Believe it or not, I think to this day, artists are still cold calling, cold emailing, dropping off demos, processing 1099s by hand. Venues are still pulling with pen and paper, getting looped in last minute with the production managers, right? Manually sending over guest lists. I mean, the list really goes on and on and on in terms of how archaic and inefficient the current processes are. So it wasn't too long before I found myself kind of immersed in a community of, musicians who are equally as frustrated and looking for better ways to kind of source gigs and perform. And I think for me, like many people kind of my age, I was able to kind of witness firsthand the drastic changes the music business was going through while I was growing up. I still remember, almost forcibly taking my dad's Walkman, to listen to music, me going out, buying a Discman, going out and buying 99-cent songs on iTunes.
Let me
right?
interrupt you. You look way too young to be using a Walkman or even a Discman, but carry on.
Oh, I thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. No, and buying 99-cent songs on iTunes and making sure my album art was all in order. Obviously, pirating songs the answer to where we are with streaming. And, I was really excited to see kind of all the innovations come about in the space, when it comes to distribution, publishing, marketing. But for some reason, even though, the live side is becoming more and more invaluable and important for a lot of these musicians and creatives to make a living and make money, that was the one side of the business that seemed to remain in kind of the dark ages, and it was very antiquated. So summer of 2019, my co-founder Ryan and I both decided to kind of take the leap of faith. He forgoed medical school. I, decided to forgo medical school respectively. And we both kind of set out, on this very mission to kind of improve the entire live music landscape, for both musicians and venues alike.
That's a fun origin story. I like that. It reminds me a little tiny bit, not that much, but we had Jack Conte of Patreon this show a while back, and I love these origin stories. Like, he was a musician, he had a band, he made a music video that got all these likes or hits, and he made like $50 or something like it, right? So he decided to reinvent how musicians were getting paid. I mean, I love like this firsthand kind of, we experienced this and we're out to solve it. So okay, so carry on from there. So you decided, all right, let's actually make a more efficient way of letting bands book, and kind of a chicken and the egg issue there, or cold start issue there, right? How do you get the musicians on first and then go to venues? Do you sign up venues, go to musicians? How did you kind of get it going?
Totally. I think for us, the musician part and winning them over was really no problem at all. I think, a lot of the times, unfortunately, when you look at the industry, right, it's very shaped really like a pyramid where I would say 99% of the musicians are at the bottom, but they probably get the least amount of attention and resources when it comes to growing their career. And for us, I really wanted to kind of help those artists, right? And help kind of cultivate and build this transparent, almost ladder system that musicians of all caliber can find their stage and continue kind of doing what they love. So for us, I think it was really coming down to better understanding, of course, the musicians' issues and what kind of hardship they were going through and some of their difficulties, but mostly from the venue perspective. We're completely free for artists to join, and our paid customers are the venues. And they reap a lot of our benefits from our technological perspective and from the data side. So just to give you kind of a little insight on like what our tech can do in general, is we've been really using the data that we collect from a live show setting to almost moneyball the music business. So what I mean by that is, we have artists on our platform with, 3 to 5 million Spotify streams who can barely sell 30 tickets in New York. But you would then go out and find a local NYU band, for example, with 500 SoundCloud followers who can sell 500 tickets because they have a lot of friends or family in the area, or maybe they're part of Greek life, right? Or let's say you and I were to perform, Nathan, and you sell 100 tickets and I sell 200 tickets, but my fans are really boring. They're drinking water, maybe a Bud Light, but your fans are, let's say, taking shots or ordering
My friends
very
are all
expensive whiskey.
Yes, we were already, yeah, that's a given. So anyway.
Yeah, there you go. So if that were to happen, ultimately at the end of the day, a lot of these venues are a brick and mortar business, and their revenue comes from F&B sales. So how could we actually better understand what defines a successful show? And can we have a better understanding of a lot of this data in an industry where there's a lot of kind of over-promising and under-delivering, right? And by collecting and having an understanding of all of these, we can make sure that artists on our platform get paid more and get a fair rate, and vice versa, right? We can also de-risk a lot of the shows that the venues put on and make sure that they can also put on more successful dialed-in shows.
Interesting. I guess, yeah, when you're saying you're free for artists, charging the venues, like for a second there, I was thinking, well, that seems a little tricky because the venues, I would imagine, I mean, artists, I can understand their pain, right? They have a hard time getting themselves booked. Venues, it seems like, would be getting so many artists coming at them that there wouldn't be the pain of finding artists to book. They probably have an oversupply of that, but I guess finding the right artists, is that kind of the pain point you're solving?
Yes.
There?
So I think part of the reason why this industry and like the live side hasn't been innovated for so long is I think a lot of different companies that came before us really saw this as a simple market. But anybody who's kind of been in the live booking side will tell you venues, they don't necessarily have a hard time finding musicians to play, right? In fact, they get flooded with hundreds, if not thousands of cold emails and inbounds from all these people wanting to play. The difficult thing for them is to identify the right act, right? That's not only a good fiscal fit, but also a brand fit, X, Y, and Z. And because we focus and prioritize our efforts on identifying that for the venues, we've seen a lot of traction there because I think especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of operators and, venue management in general are thinking about different ways to cut cost, different ways to drive more revenue and actually run a more efficient business. And I think GigFinesse really empowers and allows for a lot of these venue operators to do so.
Do the artists get a score? Like, I'm just imagining here, this artist has a 8.8 in terms of selling out. They've sold out X number of shows. The average, food and what'd you say? F&D? Is that food and drink?
Yeah, F&B, food and beverage.
Food and beverage.
Yeah, food and beverage. Yeah.
Like an amount they sold at these shows. Like, is there a lot? Is that the kind of analytics you're getting?
Totally. Yeah.
That's great. Very cool. And what's the footprint looking like today? Like, how are you guys nationwide? How many venues? What's the Yeah. What can you share?
So now we're booking a ton of shows. We were booking close to about like 1,000 different, artists and shows all across the US a month. And we're now really excited to kind of scale and grow in 2023. One of the things that I was very, excited about, and one of the different like kind of new iteration of the business is, when we first kind of started the company, I really envisioned GigFinesse solving a pain point and a problem for your traditional ticketed venue. So you're buying a ticket to go see a show. And then, I was forced to almost move out of New York City during the pandemic. And I decided to relocate to Austin. And one of the things that I realized in Austin was music and entertainment really was everywhere. I was seeing coffee shops, wineries, breweries, restaurants, right? Hotel rooftops. They all had some sort of entertainment going at all times. And I wanted to see if that was like, if there was any sort of overlap or pain point for a lot of these different venues. And it was very interesting when I was talking to a lot of these GMs. They were like, hey, it doesn't really make sense for us to hire, let's say, an events coordinator or a talent buyer to go do this full time. It's also very frustrating for me when I already have to staff the bar and, do inventory and X, Y, and Z. And I'm also the one having to deal with, these comedians coming in and asking for an open mic or this and having to cut checks every single day. It's just something that we're looking for a turnkey solution where we can work with one party and you guys can kind of streamline everything for us. And what's been really exciting, I think, for me in particular is because of this kind of opening up this new vertical, we've been able to kind of help artists find their own stage, right? Because everybody wants different things. There are, I know, artists on our platform where they would tell me, Mir, there is no way in hell I would be playing Wonderwall on 6th Street in Austin, right? I want to play my own original songs at the coolest venues and I want to be the next big star. But there are also artists who are like, hey, I'd love to play jazz standards at a hotel lobby and, make a bunch of money, right? And by being able to kind of empower the entire kind of artist community has been something that's so cool. And like the more and more we've been expanding, I think the more and more kind of letters and calls and DMs we've been getting from musicians saying, hey, thanks to you guys, like I was actually able to quit my job as a barista to pursue music full time. And that to me is, so exciting.
Yeah, no, that's great. You started in 2019 and then pandemic was in 2020. So how did you survive 2 years? Because you guys are live.
I mean, it was tough, right? I think, having founded GigFinesse in, summer of 2019, I think we've been faced with so many different curveballs, right? And I think this also relates to kind of fundraising and everything in general. Like as tough as that all has been, we were almost forced to run a very disciplined and tight operation through it all. And because of that, I think we were almost forced to run lean. We were forced to make smart decisions with our capital and almost forced to now focus on sustainable growth, right? And I think that's part of the reason why we were able to raise in this, quote unquote down market last year in like Q2 and Q3, which is very exciting. There's so many different stories I'm sure I can tell you about how tough things were, right, during the pandemic and when we first started. I think early on, it really, things all seem to be falling into place, right? Like all the stories that I heard prior to starting GigFinesse and I was exposed to kind of all followed a very similar trajectory. Like, people are coming up with a great idea, right? They build an amazing prototype, they pitch to investors, they secure funding, and then now they're going to media. And then like, TechCrunch is writing an article about you, and then they're experiencing hyper growth. And, I think Ryan and I both were very convinced, we're like, we have a great idea. And we thought everything was kind of fall into place. And I thought at that time, the biggest challenge that I was forced to face was, making sure that I could appease my mom when she found out her only son was not going to end up in medical school. Right. And that was my biggest thing that kept me up at night. And, early on, I think it definitely seemed like that was the case. It was very smooth sailing. We were able to win a lot of non-dilutive funding, opportunities because of all the competitions that, we were able to win. I was still a student at the time. So there was a lot of amazing mentors, a lot of different programs that I could really reap the benefits of. And, we thought things were going just perfect and everything was falling into place. But that honeymoon phase, didn't last that long, just as kind of we were dialing in the business and the product and the team was kind of starting to take shape. the global pandemic hit, and it instantly kind of wiped out all of the progress that we thought we had made, right? And I still kind of remember vividly the day my team and I rented a U-Haul and we were moving out of New York City, right? And the plan was to kind of crash at a team member's parents' house and quote unquote just wait it out for the next month or two, and then we'll be right back at it. And then 1 month quickly turned to like 6 months, and I was really wrecked with a lot of anxiety and guilt, right? I felt responsible for my team, my co-founder, all of their lives and, their careers were put on hold to kind of pursue what we were building together. And I mean, at the time, getting in front of investors were pretty much impossible, right? Like no one would really take our calls. And, I think being a first-time founder, it's also exceptionally even more difficult than it already is. And those who would, take the calls were also just inadvertently questioning the viability of, the very industry we were kind of building to serve. So, it was really tough. And I think we had to make a lot of pivots. I think we had to really kind of stay grounded as a team. But I think because of that, we are really exceptionally almost like strong, and we can really withstand a lot of different like turmoil that were hitting us like left and right, even post the pandemic as well. And I think that's why we were able to really scale effectively in a really lean way.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's jump into the fundraising side of things. You already teased something, the non-dilutive financing. What was that? Was that like business plan competitions or what? Tell us what you did there.
Totally. Yeah. So fundraising, I think one thing that, my co-founder and I were talking about, and one of the things that he kind of regretted was he said, hey, like, when I was at MIT, there were so many different resources and there were so many different competitions and X, Y, and Z that we could take advantage of, or I could take advantage of. And once I left and I joined the real world and I became an engineer at Google, now all of those perks kind of go away. So while you still have the student status, I think it makes a lot of sense for you to, dive in and see what kind of resources are available. And at the time at NYU, there were so many different programs that were, kind of floating around. You had like the Stern's 300K challenge, right? We had our entrepreneurship lab offering, little grants for companies to take and, work on their prototype. So the list went kind of on and on and on. So we sat down, made a full list of all the different competitions and kind of non-dilutive opportunities that we could take advantage of. And then we just applied to as many as we could. And we were fortunate enough to win a bunch of those. So that kind of provided us with our, I guess, quote unquote, like seed or family and friends capital, right? Almost to kind of kickstart the journey.
And like, give us some numbers, like how much, if someone were to try and follow that playbook, a current student at NYU or somewhere else, what kind of money can you actually kind of generate doing that?
I know companies that's generated like that raised over $1 million in non-dilutive funding and grants, right? Especially in like health tech and different things. Like for us, we were able to raise about, $200,000 in non-dilutive funding opportunities, which is, sizable for someone like that was in my shoes, right? Who was just a senior in college. And that gave us the opportunity to really kind of hone in and not have to worry about getting a quote unquote real job or whatever it may be, right? To really focus on the business, which was so exciting to us at the time.
And just one last question, and we'll move on. But grants, business plan, prizes, like what else is sort of under that umbrella?
So one other thing that I really liked about the one particular program that I participated in NYU is there's something called the Summer Launchpad, which is run by the Entrepreneurship Institute. And it's basically an accelerator, but they don't take any equity from you. Okay. So they actually give you, a small grant. I think it was $10,000 at the time. And then they bring you in, and then over the summer, they provide you with food and like office and everything else. And then you can really kind of hone in and focus on building the business there. And they also connect you with a ton of different amazing mentors. So a lot of the mentors that we met during those times ended up actually becoming not only our mentors today, but also investors in our business as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit from that. I guess, was there a seed round in between kind of college days and the most recent funding, or did you just jump to venture?
So we kind of jumped into the kind of the bigger round. So for us, we've raised, around $3.6 million to date, from, various amazing different founders, angels, people in the music business to, of course, people like Bessemer Venture Partners, right? So we were able to really get together a really cool, I think, group of people who really believed in what we were building, and then get them together to support the cause.
Okay, talk about putting that round together. When did you start it? How'd you, I guess there's multiple questions here, but how did you
Right.
identify Bessemer to lead the round? And then how did you recruit some of these musicians and others? Talk us through kind of the tactical nitty-gritty.
Totally. I mean, I think to say, that fundraising in like kind of Q2, Q3 of 2022 was tough would be an understatement. So there are a couple of things that we were faced up against, right? First, I think we were coming out of the bubble of 2021, where a lot of companies were raising much bigger rounds at higher valuations. And summer of 2022 kind of brought about a very drastic shift in how investors were evaluating companies. I was seeing a lot of my different friends or founders who used to raise with just a deck and let's say like a projections, right? And their idea at these sky high valuations, and now like the diligence and everything was getting much stricter and much longer. And this all ties back to, I think, all the turmoil that we had to go through. I think given the market turbulence we've kind of had to face since our founding, we were always operating under this lean startup kind of methodology. And I think with the market shifting towards companies with more predictable cash flow and controlled burn, I think we were really well situated to raise. And for us, I think one of the things that Ryan and I were very, very particular about from the beginning was we wanted to make sure that we could build a business and a product that was already, I think, ready to scale. I think a lot of companies now, they want to raise a lot of money and then get to kind of product market fit. We wanted to get to product market fit first. And then, we saw fundraising and financing round to be just a catalyst for growth, right? So I think once we got to that point, it was a much easier conversation for us to have. And because of that, I think we were able to be a lot more selective in terms of which investors that we want to bring on, because we don't need to just look at it as a cash injection. We can look at it as, hey, which investors are going to be able to actually provide value outside of just cutting us a check.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. How'd you get in front of Bessemer?
Bessemer was actually cold inbound. Their team took interest in what we were doing. I think they had a lot of interest in investing in like the creative marketplace or creative community, and I think we just kind of happened to stumble upon their desk. And then we got connected over the summer, and we really enjoyed our conversation with Jeremy and Alex and the rest of their team, Bhavik there, and we learned a ton, I think, during the diligence phase as well. So we thought hey, this would be an awesome partner for us to kind of add to our round as we continue to look to scale this business.
That's interesting. They reached out to you. Did you get a cold email from a junior analyst, and then that led to progressively getting to the partners?
Yes,
because
yes.
you did. Okay, because this is one of these controversial things about fundraising. A lot of folks will say with these junior folks are reaching out to you, it's kind of almost like a bot reaching out to you, almost like maybe give them a call, but you can waste a lot of time doing that. So I guess, how did that progress? Because that's sort of
I think for me, at the end of the day, I think I almost have a very different mindset and an experience when it comes to fundraising. I never had to go down the process of, hey, these are like 300 of our target investors. Let's just send out and blast out emails. I think because we were running very lean, a lot of the intros and investors that we met along the way were all through kind of connections and different inbounds that we were able to kind of accumulate. Which of course put us, I think, in a much stronger position in general. But I'm a firm believer where it's like, it doesn't hurt for you to talk to more people. And like, every time I think you go into a new conversation, they might be able to bring in a completely new perspective that you may not have even thought about, right? Of course, hopefully we've thought about everything because we live and breathe the business, but there might be things that, they might actually help us think about the business in a new way and a new light. So that's kind of how we've been, taking a lot of these calls. And that was the same thing with Bessemer at the time. And I think you can kind of tell, and I think it gets easier and easier as you kind of talk to more investors and more VCs, right? People talk about getting to the know as fast as possible to save time. I think you develop a sense of, okay, I think this one, there's actually a viability and we think this person would be someone we would love to work with. Or, okay, this was just a good, 30 minutes conversation to get to know another, investor for down the road, but I don't really see it happening anytime soon, right? So let's just put a pin on it and then maybe we can touch base down the road.
So I guess if someone asked you, all right, I just had a junior analyst at a big giant venture fund reach out to me, and should I take this call? How should I, or if I do take this call, how should I approach this call with the junior analyst? I really want to talk to the partner up here. I don't really want to talk to this junior guy. So what advice would you tell that person?
I think it's the tough thing is it's two things, right? It's twofold. I think, first of all, the analyst, unless you're a repeat founder, right, in my opinion, right, and unless you have a lot of connections, it's very difficult for you to just get directly in front of a lot of the partners or a lot of the, the decision makers off the bat. So I think it's important for, you to be able to really refine, dial in your storytelling abilities, right, and your, numbers and financials, so that the analysts should really be, kind of your cheerleader throughout the entire process, right? They should really be excited about what you're building. They should be really passionate and motivated, right? Because they also have the incentive, in my opinion, to have their first big unicorn that they want to invest in, right? So I see it kind of like that. I want to make sure that we're on the same page, right? And they can really go to bat for us as we kind of continue the conversation. And then, as what I think for the most part for me, if they are excited, the partner usually came in the second meeting, second round immediately. So I think it's almost kind of like just, I think, getting to know and suss out the deal a little bit more and then, go from there.
That's fair. That's good. Good. How about the, you mentioned you also raised from some founders and some from music folks. If you're able to mention any names, that's awesome. Also, how did you recruit people? It totally makes sense to recruit, industry folks, given what you're doing, but like how
totally. So for us, I think it all came kind of from, this is where, for me, I think the NYU network and everything in general was very helpful. Nobu, who's the co-founder of Zola, for example, was our very, very early mentor that we got connected with from NYU. And, he was always advising us. He was making time out of his busy schedule to, kind of walk us through, some of his pain points when he started the company, right? And some of the hurdles that we're going to have to face. And, as we got to know them, I think, especially all the early investors, they didn't really invest in us because they looked at our projections or they look at the financials, right? I think they really liked what we were working on. And I think they really liked us, right? And the founding team in general, where they're like, I feel like these guys are the right fit and the right type of personalities and the characters to kind of really push this industry forward. And I'm willing to, take my chances. And another, good example is Michael Montero, who was also an early kind of mentor that we stayed in touch with through NYU. And he's one of the co-founders of Resi, and he's had many successful exits. And, we continued talking to Michael, whenever we had bad times or good times, being able to lean into, I think a lot of these advisors and mentors were very helpful for us. And then, again, like, as they get to know the business, as they get to know you more as a founder and as an individual, I think they were like, this is someone who I want to back. And it's the same thing, right? From the music side or, the real estate side or hospitality side or the tech side. And being that we are kind of in the intersection of music and tech, I wanted to make sure that we could really kind of recruit a well-rounded kind of set of investors.
Did you get much pushback? We've had a couple. I've been doing this show a couple of years now. We've had a few music related startups on here. It always sounds like a very hard space to raise money in, just because people think there isn't much money. I mean, there's money in it, of course, but like hard to make money. Did you get much pushback just being in the music industry?
I think, yes, 100%. I think it's because it's a very tough industry for people to comprehend, right? And I think there's a lot of disconnect between how, let's say, Silicon Valley looks at the music business versus how LA or Nashville or New York looks at the music business, right? And it's also one of those things where you have to juggle egos from both ends, right? There's really no one right answer, right? But they might have a very distinct view, for example, the Valley, in terms of how you should scale. And it needs to be a marketplace and it should be X, Y, and Z. And this is exactly how you operate. And then the people from the music business side might be like, that's impossible because it's relationship driven, because it's this, right? Because of this, right? So I think bridging that gap is what's really difficult, and what I think a lot of founders and a lot of companies have a difficult time kind of cultivating and really kind of communicating. So for us, I think it was the same thing, right? It was very difficult in the beginning because, like you said, where people might complain about the market size, right? How is this going to be the next $1 trillion business or a multi-billion-dollar business, right? And like competition or how you're going to scale, or even like the relationship driven aspect of the business, like how you think that's going to solve. And I think it's about framing it, and I think timing, a lot of things kind of worked into our benefit, where for us, I could say one of the comparisons that I really like to use is kind of like OpenTable and Resi, right, for restaurants. Right now, the live music business and the live music booking ecosystem, it's kind of like pre-OpenTable, pre-Resi, right? People are still taking reservations by phone. And, just because now they're on OpenTable and Resi doesn't mean now the restaurant going experience changes, right? It's still the same restaurant. In fact, we can just dial things in. We can have more predictable cash flow, understand which customers are coming in and out, right? And it's the same thing, right? And I think there's a very difficult angle there where maybe the tech players might be like, hey, Mir, why don't you go out and let's say hire a VP of sales from Salesforce or HubSpot because they have a lot of experience selling SaaS or whatever it may be, right? But when you think about it, take a step back, the consumers of our product, the music business people, or like the venue owners, they don't care if, Ron went to HBS, right, and is an amazing SaaS salesperson, and he comes in and tells you, hey, we'll help you kind of dial in your business model and help you run your business more efficiently. They want to talk to people that understand the music side, right, that look like them, that actually have been part of the cultural fabric, right? And I think there's things like that to tech people, sometimes there's like almost a repulsion, right, where it's like, that's not scalable or that seems impossible. And I think being able to really tell that story where it's like, it's actually really not, right? It's about getting to the same page. It's about hiring the right people. And it's about really showing, and this is where the product really sells once they get attached to it. Now the convenience, right? The data, everything else is really what's the sticking point, and we can really scale. So I think being able to tell that story, I think took a lot longer because you actually have to have the numbers, right? And you actually have to have the proof points to tell that story compared to just saying, hey, we know this is going to work and we need $50 million to get there, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I guess, where does it go from here? Do you get into ticketing? Maybe this is a loaded question, but, obviously you have Ticketmaster and the monopoly discussions going on right now and all that stuff. And of course, everyone hates them, right?
Of course.
Is that sort of where this goes? Or I don't know, maybe you haven't.
Well, I think for us, right, it's very interesting. Like we were, fortunate, or I think it can go both ways, to have kind of received a lot of like interest from a lot of the bigger players, right? Whether it be like an acqui-hire offer or like a lead offer, whatever it may be. And for me, maybe it's because I'm still young and, maybe our team is all naive and we're so mission driven. But, one of the things that, we really wanted to do, and when we set out to start this company, was like, we want to make sure GigFinesse plays a really big role in terms of democratizing the music business. And part of me, I feel like if we were to raise, or if we were to get, acquired by any of these big entities, like, are we really going to make a difference, or are we just going to continuously benefit this enormous behemoth that's constantly on the rise, right? So I think right now, that's part of the reason why we've been staying so lean, and we've been, raising from the right type of partners so that we can kind of continue pushing our mission forward. And And I think down the road, as we have more capital, and I think as we continue to grow our moat and our presence across, all these different markets, I think that's when we can kind of start thinking about whether it be partnership opportunities or us, just really trying to make the entire ecosystem better, right?
Would you ever just go head to head? I probably don't know yet, but I mean, is that too daunting of a task because they have
I think it's one of those things where right now we are serving completely different customer bases, right? Like they see no value in what we're doing purely because to them, they haven't figured out a way to make it scalable. And number two, it's too small, right? Yeah. One sold out show for Bad Bunny or Taylor Swift will run laps around like so many of these mini shows, right? That being said, I do think eventually our goal is to build this transparent ladder system. And I keep on like kind of thinking about this universe where like artists are so empowered where, now they have this, they can use GigFinesse to click a button and, they can route a tour and they can have more freedom, right? And more equity back. And I think that's when hopefully, the entire narrative, I think will slowly start to shift. I think it's already happening now. I think it's going to be a long kind of journey ahead. I don't think it would be crazy for me to say, yeah, we're going to go to war or we're going to, go head to head with these guys for now. But I think as the industry kind of, comes to more of an equilibrium and I think that gap gets bridged, I think, hopefully we're in a really good position to push the whole kind of space forward.
Cool. All right. I'll let you go in just a minute. Any last tips, advice we haven't covered, or advice you would give your younger self? You're already pretty young, but if you were going back to 2019 and coaching yourself as a mentor, what would you tell yourself?
So one of the best advice that I got early on is kind of living by this like 33% rule, where one of my mentors told me 1/3 of your network should be people who you can learn from, right? Who once kind of stood where you stand. 1/3 of your network should be people who are on the same boat as you, right? Peers who inspire you and who you can talk to. And the last third should be people who you can mentor, so you can kind of give back to the community that also nurtured you. And I think this has been invaluable for me. Running a company and starting a business, it's really tough, right? And it's really lonely. It's really gruesome, right? And it's like the highs can be so high and the lows are so low. And it's really hard to not let yourself, kind of get carried away with either end of the spectrums, especially if you're a first-time founder. And I think having this really robust network and support system is something that I wish I was able to build early. And I took that advice more to heart, I think, when we first started. And now that, that's in place, it definitely makes it a little bit more easier, a little easier, right?
That's good. All right. Very last question. Are you still in a band? And if so, what do you play? Drumming.
So yes, I still try to get out as much as I can. My team and I, whenever I'm back in New York, we always used to put a band together, whether it be me sitting in on some of the artists, that are on the platform, or putting together like a fun little cover band. I know the last one that we did that we were able to sell out, we had like a little fun kind of Taylor Swift cover band.
Oh, fun.
We would sell hundreds of tickets, right? And all these people would come and do karaoke with us. And, I think it's ultimately at the end of the day, because the team is consisted of a lot of musicians who not only used to and still continue to book with GigFinesse and now have pivoted into just working more for GigFinesse or have the balance of still going on tour and then, helping us out. I think it's really cool for us to have such a musical team where, we can perform once a month or, once every other month and go to each other's shows, right?
Totally fun. That sounds great. I need to find some musicians, hire them into Founder Suite, because I want to have a band. I play bass, kind of, not that.
Oh, that's awesome.
But like I need to hire some friends to play.
Hopefully we can get you a show in the near future, once you get that together.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay, excellent. Well, great. Mir, this has been a pleasure. Anything you want to just promote or plug or shout out? Anything at all? Yeah.
I think the only thing I would say is, I think we're coming out of this raise, we're definitely looking to bring some new really talented people on, so if you're interested in kind of working for the same cause, if you want to learn more about us, you can go on our website and apply to any of the positions that are out there. And same thing, I think, from the venue side and from the musician side, right? If there's any artists listening to this, I hope GigFinesse is a really good resource for you as we continue to kind of scale and get into more and more markets. And same thing with any venue or hospitality, right? Managers or owners that are looking to kind of bring in some new programming or, think about programming in a more data-driven way. Feel free to reach out to us.
Definitely. I've got a couple buddies who are in music tech. I'll send this recording once it's done. So
awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really interesting stuff. And are you guys going to make a big splash at South by Southwest this year, or?
I'm sure my team's going to be there, but I unfortunately won't be there in time. But South by is always a great time for us. So
cool. We'll keep an eye out for you too. All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Over now.
Thank you.